All right, if you've got your Bibles, you can take them and turn to Joshua chapter 2. Joshua 2 is where we'll be starting tonight, and we are going to do our very best to finish up with the material that we're supposed to cover for this quarter. Tonight ends our quarter that takes us through the wandering in the wilderness and all the way through. We're supposed to get through the middle of Joshua 5 tonight, so we'll aim for that. Just briefly, the setting now has changed a little bit from the last several classes where we started. We've been talking about Moses and his final words to the people in the book of Deuteronomy. As we turn the page into the book of Joshua, we turn a page also to Joshua's leadership. Joshua takes over for Moses after he dies. And they are making preparation in chapters 1 and 2 to cross over the Jordan River and go into the land of Canaan. And last time we left off with their interaction with the woman Rahab. Remember that they are taken into her house and they are hidden because there are two men who are spying out the land so that Israel can make their way into the city of Jericho. And I think we should look maybe at about verse 15, I think would be a good place to pick up. Remember that she has said to them, I've hidden you, I've taken care of you. I know that your God is the one that's going to lead your people in, and you're going to defeat all of us, and our hearts are melting. We are scared to death. And she says, remember me, and remember my family, and remember the kindness that I've showed to you. And so she lets them down by a rope, this is verse 15, through the window, for her house was on the city wall, so she was living on the wall. They actually have done excavations and in the city of Jericho, and they would have houses built into the interior of the wall, which just adds to wall thickness. Now you've got an outside wall and maybe several layers of inside wall, and so when there were to be an attack that would come, those people would kind of matriculate to the middle of the city, but it actually adds defenses, and it doesn't waste real estate. It doesn't waste all that brick. You can actually have people living inside of all that. So she says, this is verse 16, go to the hill country lest the pursuers reach you, and hide yourselves there for 3 days until the pursuers return. Then afterward you may go on your way. And the men said to her, we shall be free from this oath to which you have made us swear, unless when we come into the land, you tie this cord of scarlet thread in the window through which you let us down, and gather to yourself into the house your father and your mother and your brothers and all your father's household. And it shall be that anyone who goes out of the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we shall be free. But anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head if a hand is laid on him. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be free from the oath which you have made us to swear. And she said, according to your words, so be it. So she sent them away, and they went, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. Now we're going to pick up just the very end of that story in Joshua chapter 6, or you will next quarter with in the next class. But I want to think about for just a moment, what are the things that are going to save Rahab? What saves Rahab's life in this?
Staying inside, keep the cord on the thing, and don't let nobody out.
That's right. So if we could summarize that in one word, what does she have to do? She has to obey, right? There are some conditions. Now, the cord is the sign. The people staying in the house is one of the expectations. What else saved Rahab? Maybe even before these conditions. Her belief, faith saves her. Maybe we would even say grace saves her. And so you see all of those things working together. Now, somebody says, well, the interesting thing is, Hebrews 11, by faith, Rahab. Faith saved Rahab. James 2, Abraham is mentioned in James 2 as well. Rahab was justified by her works. Her obedience saved her. Those things aren't in contrast with each other. Those things are necessarily together. And so it's important to see that Rahab's, somebody says, does Rahab deserve or earn her salvation? Well, as far as I know, hanging a scarlet cord out the window is not very good military strategy for defense. But it is good if that's the condition that God's given for you to be saved. And so that's what we see there.
One thing about Rahab was this, she knew before they ever come into that area that they were the children of Israel and that God was with them for all the stuff that they heard how God had saved them out of Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
killed all the enemies all the way up to this time. And that's why I believe that her belief in them, that she asked to be spared because she knew they was going
Right.
to destroy.
Right. Very good. Very good.
It's interesting the similarities between this and like the death of the firstborn when they're in Egypt.
Mm.
You got to stay in the house.
Yeah.
You got to have the scarlet cord, so we know not to kill.
Right. And the blood painted over it, but would have been a scarlet symbol in some ways as well. Yeah, that's interesting. So the same kinds of conditions for her as was for Israel. That's good. Yes, yeah, that's good. That, well, and in lots of ways, right? Like this is a picture of God's salvation, but also Rahab will be one of the ones in the lineage of Jesus, which you would think, boy, what are the odds of that? Well, it's God's providence and His working through history, and so Rahab is included in that family lineage of Jesus. Anything through 21?
We know faith without works is dead.
That's right. That's right. And her faith without works, she would have been dead. So, and that's she could not just say, "I believe that you're going to destroy it," without having responded appropriately to what the spies say. And we'll see that in chapter 6 that she in fact does do that. All right. Let me just finish up looking here at chapter 2, and then you'll carry us into chapter 3 if that's all right. So they wait. They go back to Joshua, and they tell him what had happened. Verse 23, verse 24. So they said to Joshua, "Surely Yahweh, or the Lord, has given all the land into our hands. Moreover, all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before us." When Joshua hears the report from Rahab, he takes it as a sign of good news, because he knows that if Rahab, if she is heard, and if the message has spread that far, what she says is everybody feels this way. And so Joshua takes courage in the fear that exists in the people in Canaan. Okay. Anything else through chapter 2? All right. You want to take us through chapter 3 or so?
In chapter 3, it says, "Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Acacia Grove and came to the Jordan, he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they crossed over. So it was after 3 days that the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it." So here is a visible sign that Joshua said that they would see, and it would be a signal for them to follow them. And it says they all rose real early in the morning and set out from where they were camped. Verse 4, "Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before." And Joshua said to the people, "Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." Then Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, "Take up the ark of the covenant and cross over before the people." So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. And so he tells them to sanctify themselves because tomorrow they were going to, there were some wonderful things that were going to happen, and they need to be prepared for that. And he authorized the priest to take up the ark and lead the way. And there was to be some space between them. Why do you think that was to be that way? About 2,000 cubits. That's a good question. I don't think they were to get too close to the ark. And with so many people, the further you stay back, I think, the better picture you have. of what's happening. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, I think that's certainly true. I wonder, in verse 4, where he says, "You have not passed this way before." I think there's the potential that this could get treacherous as they cross over an empty now riverbed as they're going across, especially this many people. And so he says, "You follow their path as they go through the water. You've not passed this way." But it would certainly be a powerful scene here as they're standing back watching, and they're seeing, as we're going to notice, the waters roll back there at the Jordan River. And I'm not sure that he has mentioned so far that the water is going to roll back yet. So maybe he's just kind of not yet. No. So I think maybe that there's going to be that he's just preparing them for that even before he tells them what's going to happen. But you certainly have the ark is, I think, maybe the key word in chapters 3 and 4. It's mentioned over and over and over and over. The words ark and Passover, I think, are the most used words in this. And so you kind of get a theme of what's going on here. The ark is passing over. It's leading the way, and that indicates the presence of God leading the way as they go. Anybody else? So did you get to take us through about verse 6 or so?
Yes, sir.
When they go across the Jordan, has experienced anything like that would be Joshua and Caleb.
Yes.
The other ones done passed away.
Right. Yes, that's a good point. You have not passed this way before. I thought of that in geographical terms, right? Like you've not come this direction before, but you've never passed in this manner before. You've never walked across. Now, of course, the Red Sea, I assume the Jordan River, like the Red Sea, was dry land, but they had never passed through in that way. Yeah. In for the Jordan River, yes, very good. Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah. And to echo that happened so many, 40 years previous and all that. That's good. Anything else through verse 6? All right. So in verse 7, the Lord says to Joshua, "I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you." It's interesting, in verse 14 of chapter 4, as they cross over, the text says, "On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him just as they had stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life." I imagine that the staff being held out and then passing over on dry land, the first time, people said, "Well, Moses, there's something to him." And the same thing would happen here with Joshua. Of course, it's the Lord, but they recognize that the Lord is with Moses and then with Joshua as well. So he says in verse 8, "As for you, command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." And Joshua said to the people of Israel, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God." And Joshua said, "Here's how you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each tribe of man, and when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and waters coming down from above shall stand up in one heap." All right, so Joshua says, you need to hear what's going to happen. And what is the reason that God's going to do this like this?
So the people will know that God's with them.
That's right. So they will know God's with them, so that they will know He is faithful to them. And this is going to be the sign. He says, you will know by this that God will without fail, I love that, without fail, drive out all of these nations that are in Canaan before you. So just like the Red Sea was a sign of their deliverance, this is going to be a sign of their victory or deliverance as they go into the land. I love the phrase there, that you shall know that the living God is among you. I think there's more to that than just that He isn't dead, right? That He exists, but that He's active, that He is faithful. There's just a couple of passages, and I don't want to run out of time, but I do want to note this. In Psalm 42, And verse 2, it says, my soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? In Psalm 84 and verse 2. This is a typical way that he is referenced. 84 and verse 2. My soul longs, yes, faints for the courts of the Lord. My heart and flesh sing for joy to the living God. And I think in all of those contexts, it is about God's faithfulness and His keeping of His promises. He's living in the sense that He's the same one that was there yesterday when the promises were made. And He's going to be the same one to fulfill those promises. He's living. He's not dead or stagnant or unaware or dead or something like that. So I think that's the key here. And then how is this going to happen? How is the Jordan going to be stopped?
Power of God.
That's right. The power of God, of course. Yes. What was that? Yeah, when their feet touch the ground. And I like this image that, so it's not like the Red Sea. I guess the Red Sea doesn't flow, right? It's just a big body of water. It was divided, right? This is going to be a little bit different. It's going to stop up top, and the waters are going to kind of heap up as they come down, which I wonder if there were people between there and Israel who were like, what is going on here? You know, didn't know what was happening. People like, just some guy fishing, and then all of a sudden, okay. Yeah. 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 Right. Right. But yeah, so it creates a wall on each side, right? And I think this would not have been a wall. It would have been a heap on one side, and then kind of at some point it would have been a trickle down on the south side. Okay. That's all I got to say about that.
It must have been an amazing sight.
Yeah. All right. You got anything to say 14 and following there? Take us through that.
Okay, I'll just read it.
Okay.
So it was when the people set out from their camp to cross over the Jordan, with the priest bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priest who bore the ark dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of harvest, that the waters which came down from upstream stood still, and rose in a heap very far away. At Adam, the city was, that is, beside Zaretan. So the waters that went down into the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Then the priest who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan. And all Israel crossed over on dry ground until all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. So the ground dried up, it says, and everyone crossed over on dry ground. It's pretty impressive thing that happened here. You got any more to say about that? That's
No, sir.
Kind of self-explanatory there.
Yes, sir. Anybody else? Anything through chapter 3? All right. Yeah.
They leave on it, and they leave in this manner.
Mm-hmm.
And then now they're coming into it.
Yeah.
So it's not as if they're fleeing, they're coming in. Next.
Right.
I just love the imagery there. Just echoes of
Mhm.
what happened before, but much different times. They're not escaping for their lives. They're there to take us home.
Yeah. That's good. Mm-hmm. Anything else through chapter 3? I think chapter 4 is extremely compelling too. So chapter 4, they've crossed over the Jordan, and this is verse 2. So the priests are still standing there in the water, I take it, and take for yourselves 12 men from the people, 1 man from each tribe. We've already been introduced to the fact we need these 12 men, but we hadn't been introduced as to why. And they're going to go and they're going to carry for yourselves 12 stones from here out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet are standing firm, and carry them over with you and lay them down in the lodging place where you will lodge tonight. So Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the sons of Israel, 1 man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, cross again before the ark of Yahweh your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you carry a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Israel, in order that this would be a sign among you, so that when your children ask later, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall say to them, because the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of Yahweh, When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall become a memorial to the sons of Israel forever. I love these passages that talk about stones or something being set up to be a memorial to the children of Israel as they go down through time. And you can imagine a situation like this where maybe they're passing by right here and some child sees 12 stones piled up. And they say, Dad, what are those about? And he says, well, let me tell you a story. God stopped the water of the Jordan River. Those rocks right there, they came from the bottom of that river that you can see right there. 12 of our people walked down the bank onto dry ground while the priest stood there, and they picked up those 12 stones, put them on their shoulder, and stacked them up. And when the priest walked out, the river began to run again. And that was God doing that for us so that we could come into the land. And that was supposed to be the purpose. Every time they'd ask that question, they would tell that story. I remember hearing Brother Waldron say, in the book of Judges, that generation after, what does it say about them? There arose a generation that did not know God and did not know all the mighty things He had done for Israel. How could that be? How could that be? And Brother Waldron explained it like this. He said, just imagine there is a time where the father and the son are walking by. They see those stones, and the son says, Dad, what are those stones? You know, there's some old story about rocks coming from the riverbed. Let's go. Right? We're busy. We got to go. You can imagine that happening. Getting busy, getting tangled up in the day-to-day affairs, not worried about taking the time to tell the story. I know we have memorials that are set up that I think it would be worth taking the time to explain when our children ask. When the Lord's Suppers come around, well, why can't I have some? You could say, that's just for the grown-ups. Or you could say, this is a covenant that we have made with our God. This is the sign of that covenant. And there will come a time where I hope that you'll make that covenant too, and you'll be a part of this. Now, you just have to whisper because we're in the middle of the Lord's Supper. But I'll tell you, when my boys have asked that, some of the times where I've been able to reflect the best on what the Lord's Supper means is when I've been trying to explain it to a 3-year-old, right? When I've been trying to explain why he can't break off any of that bread or have any of that juice. And so when you start having to explain it, and I think it would have done the same thing for those parents. I think if they were taking the time to explain that to their children, what those stones meant, it would be reinscribing it on their hearts, even as it writes it on their children's hearts. And so let's not waste the opportunities that God gives us with the memorials that He set up. When we see a baptism, when we come together on the first day of the week, why do we have to do that? These are memorials that God has set up, and He's put them all around us. And so let's use them in a way that I think that the people in Israel did not use them, evidently. That's not to say every parent did that, but it looks like by and large they just forgot to pass those stories on to their children. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yes. That's right. And so it is a picture of God's reliability, right? So I've made it through the Jordan River. I walked on dry ground. I didn't have to worry about the water come crashing down on me. So when God says, march around the city of Jericho, okay. When God says, do this or do that, yes, sir. Because I have seen what He can and do and what He has said He will do and when He's come through on that promise. And I think that's exactly what that's intended to do. I appreciate that. That's good.
He created a teachable moment.
He did, yeah.
Or the 12 stones did.
Yes, that's right.
It seems like I heard you preach a lesson on teachable moments, or you said something.
Yeah, I may have. Well, one of my favorite passages is that passage in Deuteronomy 6, where when the son comes to his father and said, what do all these commandments and statutes mean? And the father says, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt. Then He rescued us, and the Lord commanded us to. I love that passage. And I love that passage. One thing is because the commandments themselves kind of become a memorial that the children ask about. So it's not just the rocks that are set up, but it's the parents' obedience can become the occasion of these questions asked. But that only happens when the parents are actually obeying, right? It doesn't happen if the parents aren't observing the commandments. The children don't ever ask about it in those circumstances. So
That's already happened one time.
Yeah.
At the Red Sea.
Yes.
But those children didn't see that.
no, that's right.
So
And ideally they're not going back there, right? They're going to be in the land, and so this would provide an occasion for them to tell the whole story, right? And that wasn't the first time he did that. Your grandparents or your great grandparents, they were there the first time that happened. And anyway, there's a lot of, you can see God's. It's not just getting people to jump through hoops. You can see His compassion for the people, and He's providing them moments to pass this down. And that's the model in all of God's history of His dealings with people. It has been He will provide the lessons and the instructions, and then the parents are supposed to take those and pass them to the children. And then one day they'll be there to receive them on their own too. All right, anything else through that? I never feel bad about taking time on those kind of stories. All right, beginning at verse 8. You want to take us through some of that?
And the children of Israel did so, just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones from the midst of the Jordan, as the Lord had spoken to Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over with them to the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. Then Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests who bore the ark of the covenant stood, and they are there to this day. So the priest who bore the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord had commanded Joshua to speak to the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. And the people hurried and crossed over. Then it came to pass, when all the people had completely crossed over, that the ark of the Lord and the priest crossed over in the presence of the people. So everything just happened the way it was supposed to happen, it seems like. It said they did hurry over. I thought that was kind of impressive. I believe I would have too. But and the men of Reuben in verse 12, the men of Reuben, the men of Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh crossed over, armed before the children of Israel, as Moses had spoken to them. There was 40,000 prepared for war of them, and they crossed over before the Lord for battle to the plains of Jericho. So these men of Reuben were prepared to do their part in possessing the land, and it tells us how many there were there, and it seems impressive to me that they were the first ones to go. They were eager, it seems like. They were really wanting to go and be the first ones, it seems like. And on that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they feared him as they feared Moses all the days of his life. And so they respect Joshua now, just like they did Moses. And that's very important. They've seen him the way he commanded, and all the things that happened, and they have trust and faith in him now, and that's what God intended to happen here.
So with these passages like this, and I think there's a time Joshua has been kind of established as leader the very first time. People say, as we obey Moses in all things, we'll obey you. It's like, well, that sounds good, except that we know how they obey Moses. And here it says they stood in awe of Joshua just as they stood in awe of Moses. So, like, I'm just curious, what do y'all think about that? Like, this obviously seems, I think they're meant to be positive references, but based on what we've seen in history, it doesn't always seem that way.
Yeah. I would say a couple of things. One, probably this generation is in a little bit better standing saying that than the previous generation. So we still have like the issue with Balaam and sending in the women, but maybe given the fact that what we have with this generation is such a shortened storyline, maybe that was the exception rather than the rule from them. You know what I mean? Maybe they were more responsive than their parents had been. And we do have these highlights of moments where they were not what they ought to have been. So that maybe is one thing. The other thing is maybe in the wake of things like that, their attitude changed toward Moses as well. I see them at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. I would guess that their reverence for Moses is maybe has increased in the wake of that. But yeah, I don't know all the answers to that.
No, I think it's
And maybe it's possible that they have reverence for Moses most of the time. You know, like maybe there are like maybe kind of what I'm saying, that there were weak moments, but by and large they were obedient. I don't know.
so it would be like if in the kings,
Mm-hmm.
you had a king said he was righteous or he was faithful to the Lord all his days.
Yeah.
It's like, does that mean he never sinned again?
Right.
No, but
Yeah.
it's the general rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably how I would take that. But you are right that to say I'll listen to you like I listen to Moses is not exactly a rousing. Like that didn't exactly bring a lot of encouragement, because they didn't listen to him all the time. Maybe they've turned over a new leaf though, especially after Baal Peor and Deuteronomy and all of that. Okay. 19 through the end basically repeats that they're supposed to address this question that their children ask. I do want to note this, that they come up out of the Jordan, verse 19, on the 10th day of the first month. Well, exactly 40 years earlier, on the 10th day of the first month, this is Exodus 12, 2 and 3. This month shall be the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, they are to each one take a lamb for themselves, according to their father's household, a lamb for each household. So that begins the process of the Passover night, exactly 40 years earlier. So I think they actually leave, isn't it the 14th day of the first month that they actually leave? But that process begins 40 years to the day they come up off the banks of the Gilgal. 40 years ago, they were slaves in Egypt. And just think about the number. If we had time to review, we would think about all of the things that they had gone through to now not only be not slaves in Egypt, but to be the invading force that's about to take possession of their own land. And maybe we'll make reference to that at the end. Now, look at verse 23 and 24. The Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of Yahweh is mighty, that you may fear Yahweh your God forever. So there's a twofold purpose of this. It's to be for the nations. The nations are going to hear about this, and they're going to know that Yahweh is mighty. And you're going to know this, and you're going to fear Yahweh your God forever. At least that's the intention of this. That's what you should get from this lesson. And as that's passed down to the children, that's what they should be doing as well. Okay. Anything through chapter 4 that you'd like to say? Comments or questions? All right. Chapter 5. We only need to go through verse 12. Isn't that right? That saves us a whole 3 verses to not have to cover.
I think
we can do it.
1 of chapter 5 kind of sums up
Yes.
what we were just talking about.
That's right.
I'll just read it, and then you can. And so it was when the kings of the Amorites who were on the west side of the Jordan, and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan from before the children of Israel until we had crossed over, that their heart melted, and there was no spirit in them any longer because of the children of Israel. So everybody is scared now. They've heard about what's happened, and they're very fearful of the Israelites. That just sort of wraps up what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
It seemed like in past studies we talked about this time of year, Jordan would have been at flood stage.
Mhm.
So they, these people would have been kind of counting on that, maybe buying some time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if Israel can cross the Jordan right now, we're in big trouble. And surely they would have heard about how that had happened too. So
There was no doubt it would have. It took a miracle for this to happen.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, you see verse 24 that I just mentioned, that they may know that the hand of Yahweh is mighty. Well, they figured that out very quickly.
That's a massive amount of people coming across.
Yeah.
Realize what's coming.
Yeah, that's right.
How many people do you think were?
I mean, it could have been 2 million, because we don't get a count on the Levites and we don't get a count on the women and children. We only get a count on the fighting men, and it was 601,000 something.
So we don't get counting Levites this time.
I guess we do get a count on the Levites, but they're not included in the 600,000. But I think, what is it, like 22,000 or something like that there are Levites. So I guess we can just add that in. I'm not a mathematician, so I can't, but whatever plus 22,000 or so. But we don't get the women and children reckoned into that number. So if you just double the number of men, you'd assume that would be about right. Then you've got 1.2 million. And if you add one for each couple of man and woman, which would be about average at least, then you're at 1.8 million. And I think if you divided between all the couples, the average children probably would have been higher than 1 or 2. So you're talking about a pretty big mass of people. Now, not all of them come across. You got Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh, that their families are staying on the other side. But that doesn't change that you're looking at a fighting force of more than 600,000 people. And that's substantial anyway.
That's a lot of people across.
That's right. Yeah. Safely, and didn't even get wet. Okay. So at that time the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the sons of Israel a second time. A second time, I take it to be that 40 years ago, they would have circumcised these people in Egypt. In Egypt, when they were born, right? But this second circumcision is because the explanation here is there had not been circumcisions in Egypt, in the wilderness since they had come up out of Egypt. And so the second time, I don't think in the sense that they had been circumcised before and now are being circumcised again, but kind of a second mass circumcising. I don't know what's being referenced as the first time. I don't know if it's referencing Genesis 17 when Abraham references his, or if it's just saying a second time in the sense that we used to do this and now we've got to do that all again because we haven't been observing that so far. I will say this. It is a little bit interesting to me that this surgical procedure for all the fighting men takes place when they get on that side of the Jordan. Like you would think that could have been done after they had defeated Sihon and Og on the other side of the river. It is leaving them, I would say, exposed and maybe somewhat incapable for several days in enemy territory, which is a testimony to their strength, to their faith and to God's protection of them. And so, yeah, there you go.
They also had another point too.
Yeah.
Under normal conditions, if somebody had all that done to them, fighting men wouldn't be. They can't say, I did it on my strength.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
And then it made them put more faith into God to actually help them win the battle.
Right. And in part, verse 6 may explain that a little bit too as I'm looking at this, because they did not obey the voice of the Lord. It was not, I don't think it was, that is really talking about those who had perished in Egypt. I wonder if their failure to circumcise, if that was God approved. I don't know. But it's almost as if before you go any further, that's what has to be done. That wouldn't be the first time that happened. Remember with the weird situation with Moses and Zipporah? Is this the end of Exodus chapter 4? And Zipporah circumcises the sons? And there's a lot of questions I have about that text. But I think basically what's going on there is God is saying, you're not ready to move forward until this is taken care of. And so maybe there's some of that going on here, is that they've waited all the way up until now, and now they've got to be, this has to happen, because they're not really, this was the sign of the covenant. This was not some just unessential. They weren't in proper standing. That's right. That's right. Very good. Okay. Now, verse 9, I love this. Yahweh said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." And so the name of that place is called Gilgal, which means, it sounds like the Hebrew word to roll. So the idea there is the reproach of Egypt was not rolled away till they make it to the land. And maybe one way that we could illustrate that, I don't know that this is what that's talking about, but maybe we could illustrate it this way. Remember, every time that God is about to destroy the people of Israel in the wilderness, what Moses says? What will the Egyptians say? Right? That's always kind of this looming cloud over the people, that if they don't make it to the land, they might as well have never left Egypt. Right? Egypt is still kind of this dark cloud hanging over them. But now they've made it into the land. So whatever happens now, it's not about Egypt anymore. Right? Egypt's reproach has been rolled away from them. They are in their land, the land that God swore to them now. And so, at least to that extent, they've accomplished the mission. God has accomplished the mission with them. And if they're destroyed, then it won't be what will the Egyptians say. It might be what will the nation say, but nothing specifically about Egypt.
Well, I also think that when that was brought up before God, when they done all that sin, that God told Moses, we can wipe all these people out and I can create other ones. So
Yeah. Start from you.
I don't really have to have these because they're so wicked.
Right. That's right. Okay. You want to finish this up there, Mr. Dwight? Those last few verses, 10, 11, 12.
Now the children of Israel camped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight on the plains of Jericho. And they ate of the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. Then the manna ceased on the day that after they had eaten the produce of the land. And the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. So the manna ceases. That's very, very important point of time there. And they begin to eat the produce from the land of Egypt. So a full 40 years has passed since they left Egypt, and the journey is complete.
No.
And they don't have to worry about Egypt anymore. Egypt's in the past, and they've observed the Passover. It was very convenient that it worked out at this particular time.
Yeah.
To where they could do that, and I'm sure God had that planned all along.
Yeah.
But that's all right.
Yeah, and yeah, that's good. I love that when they eat of the produce of the land, the manna stops. Well, in one sense, the land was now God's provision for food for them. It was not as if God was able to stop providing food. He's still providing it. He's just providing it in a different way. He's providing it through the land instead of providing for the manna that rains down each day. Wow.
Some scholars actually say that historical biblical scholars said that, the manna, in addition to it just being food from the Israelites, if you can look through the history from the time he started feeding them up to now,
Yeah.
it was more than just food, but the food that they were given, you never hear of them having any kind of sickness or problems as long as they ate it. So it was a divine food that covered a way lot more than just eating your regular food.
Yeah, maybe. There, he does talk about didn't even make their shoes wear out, and clothes, garments, and all that wear out. So they were keep the same size clothes. It's like a weight loss plan too. Didn't have to get new clothes. No, God did take care of them, provided for them, and took care of them in the wilderness. That's right. Anything else as we close? Evan, really enjoyed this. This has been my first time to be able to teach with Brother Dwight, and I think that's gone swimmingly. I've just really enjoyed that and appreciate the good work he's done in preparing and teaching us, and I think it's been good for us as a congregation. And then, Lord willing, next quarter, Brother Lonnie and Brother Colby will be out here going through Joshua and Judges, and so I know y'all are looking forward to that. So, all right, till next time.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.